Thank you. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome our speaker today, who is Gianpaolo Folena. Gianpaolo Folena is a Maria Maertu, I think the latest Maria Maertu postdoc, who just joined a week ago, very recently. And as most, Gianpaolo got his PhD in 2020 at the University of Roma La Sapienza. Since then, he has been moving from different places like the École Normale Supérieure, Duke University, and the University of Paul Sabatier. And he has a broad range of interests, ranging from disorder models, optimization, industrial system, the jamming transitions, evolutionary systems, artificial chemistry, and others. As most postdoc, Maria postdoc, he came here with his own project, but he's willing to, he's open-minded, I'm sure, and he's willing to collaborate with some of you in different projects or even this one. So you think this is interesting? He'll be around for a while, at least a year. So do talk to him and collaborate with him. Okay, today he's going to tell us about this interesting subject about algorithmic perspective for the origin of life.
Thank you, Raul. First, I want to thank you to the all the IFISC and in particular the commission that accepted my project, because I think it's a quite weird project. It's not a standard project, and it's difficult to accept things that are a little bit different. Yes, it's a kind of risky project. So yes, and so I will speak about the origin of life from an artificial life point of view. And when I think about the origin of life, I'm not thinking about our being macroscopic. I'm thinking really the origin, like a the starting of life, biochemistry, etc. So that's why I'm studying here in the phylogenetic tree of life. Okay, so I'm looking, so I will present this. Is a very new project also for me, so I have many doubts. So if you don't understand, it's not up to you. You need to ask a question, because myself, I don't understand many things. And I'm looking for people that are interested in this project. Okay, so I just don't repeat it, but I mean, I've been in Paris, LPTMS, in ENS, in Duke, but all this was about the system spin glasses. So I've worked in very abstract models of disorder system. If you know, the P-spin model is a mean field model on a sphere, n-dimensional sphere, fully connected, and the landscape is very complex, and I study optimization in this landscape, very complex. And then I started hard spheres in infinite dimension, also is a mean field model, so it's the only solvable model of a sphere. This with Francesco Zamponi, for those who knows, Silvio Franz, Federico Ricci-Tersenghi, Patrick Charbonneau. And then I was very bored. I mean, it was nice stuff, but too technical, and there was not a big question behind, I thought. So I wanted to change, and I found a project in Toulouse, and it was a very weird project, very ambitious, and it was about evolution. And the idea of the project was to understand if there is a mathematical core to evolution in the Darwinian sense. And the project was 1 year, and this was very bad for the project, and always because of financing problems. So the grant was ending 1 year later, and so it couldn't be extended. So I stayed only 1 year, and I didn't manage to do almost anything. So I just thought a lot about this problem. And what I will tell you today is about what I thought about and what I want to continue this year. And then I went back to Rome because I couldn't find a spot for me, and now I'm here. So the big question is, what is life? And this question is, I mean, has been there since the human beings have been there. But here I reported just 3 books that I found very compelling, very interesting. One, I think you know, Schrödinger, What is Life? And where he introduced the concept of aperiodic crystal. So he had the prediction of the DNA before the discovery of it. And but he's also arguing about entropy and how there is a natural tendency to get to equilibrium in physics, and so it's strange, it's difficult to argue how life can emerge from this tendency. And then other 2 books are Le hasard, la nécessité de Monod is a biochemist and speaks about like proteins, enzymes, and how the enzymes constitute a sort of cybernetic model, a minimal. They have a capacity that are cybernetic in the sense that they have function, they are activated, and they activate other function. And then the major transition in evolution is Smith-Zamari, evolutionary biologist that described the stratification of evolution through life from the beginning of biochemistry to life, our life, and technology that is an extension of our life. Okay, so in the book of Schrödinger, I wanted just to show this paragraph because I think it has something that is very concerning also my project, that is the idea of negative entropy. So I don't know if you want to have a little time to read it. So what then is the precious something contained in our food which keeps us from death? And so does the living organism continually increase in entropy, produces positive entropy? It does tend to approach the dangerous state of maximum entropy, which is death. And so he argued that he needs to have some mechanism to extract free energy to then keep the structure, not only keep the structure, but also grow in the structure if it's in development. Okay. So then when at NASA they want to find life in exoplanets, is way much more difficult. It's not about a simple definition because you don't know what to expect. You don't know how different the other life should be. And so they have this letter. This was published in 2018. And this is from very simple things to more advanced things. And you can see that, for example, they want to see amino acids, but amino acids, they have been shown also to be many amino acids, not all of them, can be brought just by simple chemical reaction, like there was some experiment in the 60s even. But some they have found them in meteorites, but they are very difficult to produce on Earth. So there are some important questions that I don't have a lot of information about it, but biochemists are studying a lot life in this sense. And above all, there is the adaptation and Darwinian evolution. And so if I want to summarize this letter in one phrase, I would say that a system is alive when it's a self-sustained chemical system capable of undergoing Darwinian evolution. This is very simplification of life, but is let's say my starting point. Do you have questions? I will try to explain what I mean, but things of a system that is out of equilibrium, but is keeping its organization and is self-sustained because is controlling the way is keeping his flow of energy and material to keep his organization. Then, okay, so this is for exoplanets and biological life, but life perhaps is something broader than biological life. Perhaps life is also life of culture, life of language, life of technology, life of whatever. One mental experiment that I do sometimes is to think about language as an independent system. Like imagine that the words and phrases are beings and they are evolving, and we are just the environment for them to evolve. So then you can imagine really that this is kind of a live system and we are just the substrate on which is evolving and replicating. And perhaps, yes, this is a question. It depends on what you mean by, if there is some selection rule, so, like the environment is selecting, like if you think of what is called the memes now and how there is this selection of some things that is very resonating with.
But it could be neutral, not subject to pressure.
I mean, there is, huh?
Randomly changing.
Yeah, but it's so organic and complex that imagine that the language is randomly changing. I mean, it's structuring over time, clearly. So there is a kind of, there is a historicity. You cannot delete the past. The language now depends. So this is, for example, the phylogenetic tree of Indo-European language. You cannot see but all the red one are the dead one and the green one. Okay, but then one can argue, okay, but these are just substrate of biological life. So it's just a chain of stratification of complexity, and you start with DNA, RNA, DNA, cells, humans, language. So you are, and this is the third book I was speaking about, major transition and evolution, that is speaking about this stratification of life. But then you can say, okay, but if we invent a new system, we do an artificial system, there is no problem of biological life. So the idea for me is to try to study life from artificial life. That I mean, perhaps is completely wrong, and but you need to argue why it's wrong. So these are three examples of three systems that have been introduced during many years. The first one, I think you know, the Game of Life of Conway, and this video in particular is showing that the Game of Life is capable of simulating itself. So you have this, the microscopic that then can create a copy of itself on the macro. And this is a property of Turing system in general. So this is a Turing system, a system that is at the same level of algorithmic capacity of a Turing machine. Then you have this that perhaps know of you. Has somebody heard about Tierra? So Tierra...
I've read something years ago.
So Tierra was made by biologists, and this is already quite strange. It was a computer system, and the idea is to make the CPU and the RAM available to programs that compete for the CPU and the RAM. And they compete, but they have also mutations. And at the end, there are some that are more able to take the memory, take the CPU. There are some that start to dominate the system, but then there are strange emergent mechanisms. For example, there is the parasitism. At a certain point, there are some programs that they are not independent. They just use the mechanism of other to grow. And this is without putting it so there is some functional kind of emergence of some functions that are very primordial, let's say, in this model. And then there is this Lenya that is the video doesn't work, or has already passed, perhaps. So Lenya is a game of life in the continuous, was invented recently. And so the main idea is the game of life, the cellular automaton, but then you, instead of writing the equation as discrete one, you write it as continuous one. And so you have a larger space of possibilities. And notice also the fact that very different people participate to this artificial life community. So this is the International Society for Artificial Life that was created in the 80s, I think. And every year they do a big conference around the world. And there are people from physics, biology, chemistry, philosophy, computer engineer. It's very broad kind of. So I was once there, and it's quite strange to have a so heterogeneous. But there is one main thing that is the idea of artificial life behind these questions. Another thing that I wanted to say is that, okay, this is a deterministic system. Let's say also this has mutation, so as a randomness. This is deterministic, and all the complexity comes just from the initial condition. So if you put a good initial condition, you will have a very strange things, also that can replicate and grow and whatever. But perhaps what I will argue is that one important thing in artificial life is to have mutation. We want mutation. Okay, so let's try to re-ask what is life, and we reuse the idea of self-organization and Darwinian selection, but instead of saying Darwinian selection, we use the concept of self-organization and open-endedness. So this is metabolic network of a cell, general cell, so it could be many different cells, and this is the phylogenetic tree of different cells. So both of these are ways to characterize, this is the way to characterize self-organization, and perhaps this answers a little bit the question before. The metabolic network is a way to define the self-organization of a system. And is a static representation, static in the sense that you can have out of equilibrium processes, but is an atemporal characterization. You don't have adaptation, you don't have evolution in the, at least in the standard way of analyzing it. And then there is the historicity of life and trying to characterize what has gone in the past. Also, this is a representation of historicity. It's not the true historicity. It's the historicity mediated by, for example, the genome, the DNA. But you could use other means. We know now that the DNA is not the only thing that encodes life, but there are, for example, proteins, epigenetics around DNA or other things. And so I want to argue that these are two different representations and also two different tendencies. Life wants to organize because it needs to keep the structure that it has, and it's very organized structure, and to keep it is very difficult. It's very difficult to keep the body with so many layers of complexity in the state and very complex state it is. But at the same time, you want it to be adaptable. And adaptable can be, for example, adaptable in the genetic sense, but also not in a genetic sense. You can imagine also a metabolic network that it doesn't have direct encoding from a DNA, but it has some kind of adaptation mechanism that is difficult to see if you're looking just for stationary state, because you need to push very far the metabolic network to see the reaction and the adaptation. Okay, I don't know if there are questions about. Okay, so again, self-organizing, let's say the important things is that there are subparts that contribute differently to the whole, and there is a kind of metabolism of fluxes of energy, materia, information, and some example, the cell. You call the organelles of the cell, and then you have the organisms that have organs, and you have the state, for example, Spain, that has organs of governance. So there is a kind of, there are some things that are common to different layers of evolution and complexity. For example, self-organization, but then it's difficult to put some mathematics behind this. This is just words. Okay. Again, what is open-ended evolution? So here I write not fitness optimization, because physicists, at least in my branch of physics, normally we think of evolution as you have a fitness landscape and you're trying to optimize on this fitness landscape. But I don't think this is evolution. This is perhaps is a learning landscape, or but is not adaptation in a general sense. Perhaps is adaptation under very strong stress. So when you need to optimize, is because if you don't optimize, you die. But then there is evolution also where you don't have this kind of pressure. So the concept of open-endedness for me is the idea that the configuration space that normally in physics we consider as predefined is not predefined, but the configuration space is evolving with the dynamics itself. And a simple example for this, for me, is the technological evolution. So we just have discovered the power of ChatGPT or this kind of bot, and now there will be like there is an avalanche of possible derivatives from this, and this is this function. There is a new function and novelty that enter the system, and you don't know the space of the configuration before this novelty enter the system. But after, the space of configuration grows a lot, and you have many other things that you can do. So this is, I don't know if you have a question about this. Does it sound, this idea of the space of configuration is not predefined, but is evolving with the dynamics itself?
Dimension of this functional space.
What is the dimension? I mean, it's difficult to characterize the dimension of, but I can make an example. So, for example, imagine a landscape that is at the beginning as only a minimum. So you think as a fitness landscape. So then you have the space of configuration and you have the fitness on the space of configuration. And you say, okay, instead of studying the configuration space, I study the topology of the fitness. And at the beginning, the fitness has only one minimum. And then you start to study different minimums that generate because of a feedback dynamic. So the fitness is not fixed. The landscape is evolving. I don't know if you... Okay, I will come back to this later. Anyway, other questions? Okay. Okay, so this year at IFISC, I want to study two models that present this self-organization, both self-organization and open-endedness. The first is a mean-field model of disorder system, because I'm very used to disorder system, and perhaps is a sub-project, is not the main project. And then I want to study an artificial chemistry, and I will introduce the artificial chemistry in the next 20 minutes, that I think presents this tension between these two things. So coming back to the open-ended landscape. So this is the first project, the mean field project. So you imagine you have a particle interacting, and you are studying a disorder system, and the particle interact with a random quench disorder. And then the landscape, the resulting landscape is very rough and full of minima. This is the standard picture in disorder system, that you have a landscape, you have a quench disorder, that is the interaction between different elements is taken from a quenched Gaussian. And then you have a very complex landscape with a lot of minima. And then you're just studying the dynamics of the configuration on the configuration space brought by this landscape. But then if you put some feedback and you say, okay, this trajectory is evolving on this landscape, but there is a feedback on the interaction. So the interaction then is changing the landscape. So you have that the particles are interacting. There is a landscape on the configuration space, and this landscape is changing because of a feedback on the. So this is a way to put the simplest way to put, let's say, a mechanism of adaptation in a disorder system. If you don't know about disorder system, perhaps it's a bit abstract, but. And then you can characterize two times: the relaxation time, that is the relaxation inside this landscape, is the original relaxation time, and then the variation time, that is the time of variation of the quench disorder, that is not anymore quench, but is an adaptive disorder. And so you can imagine that the landscape is evolving, and there are some different minima that are developing, and you are studying an adapting regime in which you are comparing these two times. These two times are almost the same. And then the classical learning regime, I don't know, the teacher-student scenario, if you have ever heard of it, in a disorder system, you can have some reference teacher and then some student that learns some feature. And this is the quench disorder. And what I would like to consider is to put some kind of time evolution given by a feedback. So this is the idea of a project that I would like to do, but I need somebody that is interested, because, you know. And then the second project is a little bit broader, and it starts from a model that was introduced a few years ago, 4 years ago, by a computational linguist. And so when I was in Toulouse, I started studying to find a minimal model that was interesting for me, and I found this model, and I wrote to this guy, and I say, this model is incredible, and can I collaborate with you? And I started to collaborate. And now I will try to explain why I think this model is incredible. It's an artificial life model. It's an algorithmic chemistry. So the base of the model is combinatory logic. Combinatory logic is a field that was invented in the beginning of the 20th century by logician, mathematician, and is about computation. So they invented what I call here the atoms of computation, like a minimal way of writing a system of computation. And the point of this system is very simple, and it has the Turing completeness property that we want, that it means that it can simulate whatever program that we are using or we can imagine. So this system is made by letters, and the letters, they act one on top of the other. There are only two rules. So one letter or one expression with another, there is an application, and this is the application. For example, if I have the letter S and K, the application of S on K. If I have the expression SK and S, the application of SK on S. If I have the letter S and the expression SK, is the application of S on SK. So we see that it's important how parentheses are put. So there is encapsulation based on application. And then there are, for example, three evaluation rules. This is an example of a system. There could be others, but this is a system that is known to be Turing complete. So there is the identity evaluation. So the letter I, when act on expression X, gives back X. This is the identity. Then the K has two arguments. All these evaluations are agnostic on what is the argument. So they're just manipulating the argument without knowing what it is. So the identity is just returning X. The K is taking two arguments and returning the first. And the S is the one that is more interesting. Is taking three arguments and is duplicating the third one, because there are two, and is putting it in this new structure. So is X applied on Z, that is applied on epsilon on Z. And this is called the SKI base. And mathematicians have shown that already SK without the I, the identity is just to make it more efficient, but SK model is Turing complete. So it means that with these two rules, without the I, these two evaluation and this application, you can write whatever you want. But then perhaps it's not very efficient how to write things. For example, you can create numbers and operation on numbers, but you need quite a long expression to do that. But it's Turing complete. And why is it interesting that it's Turing complete? Because Turing complete, in some sense, is putting the unboundedness of the complexity of the algorithms. So the algorithms, in principle, with this system can become arbitrarily complex. Is the potential of the. So, for example, this expression, this is just to have some image of what are expressions. So this expression with this encapsulation can be represented in different ways, just to have an image of what is the expression. You can imagine that, for example, binary tree, plane tree, this is simple, SKK, SKK, act on SK, act on SK. So this to say that then when you make an evaluation, what you are doing, you are just transforming the tree of the expression locally. For example, the action of S is this one, and you can represent it as this transformation tree. So each evaluation is a transformation of the tree of the expression. And you have whatever kind of expression possible. Okay, an algorithm is the sequential evaluation of this expression. So this expression have different letters, and each letters can be evaluated, and so you can go on with the algorithm. And So dynamically, what can happen? So you start with an expression, you have many letters, you start to evaluate it. At a certain point, you arrive to an expression that you cannot evaluate anymore because you don't have enough thing. For example, you have an S that has only 2 entries and the third one no. So you cannot evaluate it. You can evaluate only if you have enough argument for it. So then it stops. So you are in a fixed point of this. So the algorithm can halt and is a fixed point. But then the algorithm can do more. It can enter a loop, so it's a dynamic attractor. It can loop in something that has different bifurcation. It can grow in different way, fractal way, or even crystal fractal way, or even it can behave very erratically. It can go and then increase, go back. And the point behind all this is that the system is Turing complete. So there is the so-called halting problem. You don't have any program that can decide if the expression you are giving will halt or not. There is not an absolute way to define if it's halting or not. The only way is to act on each expression and go until you find, unless there are you find that there is a loop, for example, and then you can say, okay, it will never halt. Okay, so this is a very rich system. So the combinatory computation is a very rich system. But then the idea is to put it in a physical system. So I don't just want to do computation. I want to create a system that has some kind of emergence of computation. I want to put dynamical rules that are chemistry-like, and I want something to emerge. So I take the same SKI combinators. This is 2021. And I put it, I create a chemistry of this. So I create a base equilibrium dynamics that is just cleavage and ligation. So I take 2 expressions and I break them. You need to imagine that here there is a parenthesis. X that acts on epsilon is just a contraction. And ligation. So you can apply and detach things, expression, in a reversible way. This is like, you can imagine it as a thermal bath. You're just attaching and detaching expression randomly, you take one. And then you put, and so there is conservation of mass. And then you put the irreversible part of the chemistry, that is the action of this, but also with mass conservation. So for example, you have a long expression, in the middle you have identity of X, and the identity acts, so it is detached. When it acts, it is detached, and it remains like this. For K, you keep only the first X. So the first X is kept, and you detach epsilon and K. And for S, you do this, but you need to absorb at Z, because S is duplicating Z. This is to have a reaction that have mass conservation with combinators. And this is the irreversible part, because all these arrows do not have the reverse reaction. Okay. So, questions? So this is
the way the combinator acts.
Yes, but here I'm putting also the mass conservation. So these
are new rules.
the same rules of this.
But you are replacing the previous rules. You are changing, you will not use it.
No, I'm using this, but at in the interior of each expression, that was what I was doing also before. The only difference is that I want to have mass conservation. So when, for example, I'm doing this, here when I act on these 3 arguments, I have the duplication of Z. So in order to make this act on these 3 arguments, I need to put a Z here to have conservation of Z. I need to have a binary reaction. Does it make sense?
No, but you said that this could replace the role of the commutator or
Are the same, but they are chemistry-like. So they have conservation of the number of each atoms. So the length of this expression, the sum of this and this is the number of combinator of each kind in this expression and this is equal to this. You want to you don't want to create new combinators. You just want to, okay? The number of combinators in each reaction is conserved, of each kind.
I'm trying to understand what is in the third expression of this, the AA combinators. S to me, I mean, you say that it's like an atom and then you have this mass conservation, but S there is an operator. I mean, S applied to.
Yeah, but also X, Y, Z are operator, are made of, each one is an expression. It can be arbitrary complex, it's agnostic. So S is an operator that acts on 3 arguments, and the 3 arguments can be whatever. They are expression, the 3 arguments.
Can be also S.
Can be S, or can be S of K, or can be S of K of whatever.
Which one is A, X, Y, Z?
Whatever.
You show an example.
Yeah.
Okay.
For example, here I have K, K, S of K. First argument, this X is K, epsilon is K, and Z is S of K.
Yeah, so X, Y, Z takes the value S, K, or Y.
Yeah, but not only one letter. Whatever expression that is made of S, K, and Y.
Set of values of S, K, and Y. And then.
So the system, the evolution starts with a pool of just detached combinators. And then I start ligation and cleavage and this.
And how do you decide which to interact or which to interact?
So there is a mean field interaction. I just take 2 random and I make them interact. And then cleavage. And if I don't consider evaluation, so I don't consider the irreversible part, I can analytically solve this problem. So it's like a thermal bath. And I can have the distribution of all the expressions that are at equilibrium in this ligation cleavage. But this is not interesting. This is equilibrium. This is the depth. We want to put the complexity on the depth of equilibrium. So then, so this is equilibrium with 2 rates of ligation, rates of cleavage that are proportional to the concentration is a Gillespie dynamics. And this you can solve. I won't solve it. I won't explain the details, but you can derive, for example, the diversity of expression and other. In theory, you can. You have the probability of each expression to appear in the system. Okay, but then the interesting part is when you have you activate the irreversibility, so the combinators are acting irreversibly. And there is an ecosystem of, so there are the fixed point. So if you remember, the dynamics of this algorithm can get or to a fixed point or to a loop or things more complex than this. And so the first thing that you observe is the emergence of loops. And these are some of them. So there are simple loops like this. It's just 2 different way of doing the loops, and there are more complex one with different bifurcation. So let's take, for example, this loop. So it's made of 3 expressions. So it's SII that act on SII. So the third argument is the one that is replicated. So you need an external of the same. And then you act and you have this, and you have DSS that is detached. And then the next step, you have this formula here, and you act with the I, and you have this, and you have this waste. And then you act with this I, You have this and you have this waste, and this is the same of this. So you return back. So this you can represent as a cycle. You are doing a loop, but you are consuming some resources to do the loop. So you are injecting some food, SII here in green, and you are wasting it. You are decomposing it. So it's really a small metabolism. I mean, really a small metabolism. It's an abstraction of a metabolism. So one thing that I want to do in this, so I have the analytical equilibrium, etc., and I want to understand the out of equilibrium irreversible thermodynamics of this. I want to evaluate what is the extraction of free energy from the thermal bath. So there is this equilibrium thermal bath, and this loop are extracting free energy from this to do nothing. They are just decomposing material, but this is the first step. Then there are loops that are more complicated that loop, but also create some other resources. And this is the interesting part. So this is the most simple part that emerged.
You mentioned you had a Boltzmann distribution of those things.
So yes, the equilibrium. When I don't have any irreversible process, I can evaluate it as an equilibrium, and it reflects the Boltzmann distribution. But when I go irreversible, then it's difficult.
When energy is
I can put an energy associated. So this Gillespie dynamics, you can show that is equivalent to associate an energy to each expression, equal energy to each expression. So it's just
the balance.
yes. But so so there is this emergence, and I want to study this, and I want to understand thermodynamically what is going on. So how much free energy are extracting from the thermal bath, and also there is another thing that is very interesting, is that the same loop you can represent in very different ways. So this loop that we have just analyzed, one can substitute the I with SKK. One can show that there are equivalent ways to write the same algorithm. SKK is equivalent to Ni. So you could rewrite this loop with this formula. It's the same topology of loop, let's say, but there are way more steps. So there is a kind of abstract class of this loop, but then there are different representations. And there are some that are more efficient than others because they are shorter. So there is already some kind of selection rules, thermodynamic selection rules that is going on. And this is something that I want to characterize to understand the interplay between the efficiency and the
Why you say it's more efficient? It uses less.
because it uses a food that is very long. Here is okay. So then here, so when you do very big simulations, so we managed to simulate up to 10 billion, 10 to the 10, 10 to the 9, 10 to the 10 combinators. And the point is that if you take, for example, a billion system large enough, you start to have emergence of network of cycles. What does it mean? It means that these are the cycles, but they are not disconnected and just consuming. They are producing some resource that other cycles are using. So then you can have a network of interaction between cycles, and I call it the blob. And this is where it becomes very difficult to understand what is going on, but at the same time it's exciting, and where I think there are many questions. One question that I have with respect to that is, so is there any self-organization in this blob? I would say that there is, because I mean they are exchanging resources, and some cycles exist only because others are there. And there is open-ended behavior. This is, for example, something that can be studied with historicity. So doing different histories with different randomness, the same system. If you have completely different blobs, topology of the blob, etc., it means that it's very open-ended dynamics. But to quantify it in a good way is not simple. I mean, I don't know how to do it. So things that I want to do. I want to evaluate the entropy production of this cycle. Also, if perhaps there are some non-triviality by the fact that cycles are reversible, so there are some things that are non-trivial about this. But then I want to understand what is the top. If I can in some way describe the topology of this network, if there is something simple that I don't know, is a very simple topology, or I don't know. I really don't know. In general, I would like to have some measure to put on, because the system is just expression. So I need to extract information for the system, and I don't see anything. I need to have some guess of what I'm looking for. So is there some way to quantify self-organization and open-endedness in this system that is a system of strings, essentially? So this is a question that, and then one thing that I'm very interested in is if I put, let's say, a network that I self-engineer because it does something, and I do it in a clever way, just as it does something and maintains itself. For example, I've tried to think about creating some enzymes of a certain kind. Can I put it in the system and it's persistent, or just when I put in the system we collapse, and so it means that I cannot really put something, let it live and then evolve from there. So can I nucleate something already, let's say, alive? Okay, that's it. So I ask your help. So if you are interested in this, you can come and we discuss, and I'm very happy. If you think it doesn't make sense, please tell me why. If you think that you know people that are interested in this, please make us in contact. And if you have a suggestion on literature, concept, or communities, let me know. That's it.
Thank you for this interesting talk and provocative. Do you have any comments, or William?
Very nice talk. I have millions of questions, but I will summarize in two groups. One with several combinators in it. So is there growth? Are there mutations? Is there selection in the system?
So mutation are not expressed, are not put in a direct way. There's no mutation put as a mutation, but the thermal bath of ligation cleavage in some sense is putting mutation, in the sense that it can generate. So I didn't say, but the cycles, they emerge randomly. So it's just the first cycle, the most basic one. It's just a matter of large deviation, or like the time of emergence. The typical time of emergence is just a probability of, and then from the stratified dynamics, you can imagine that. I mean, mutation is given by cleavage. So you have an expression that it was built by cycles in the stratified way, and then there is a cleavage, and it breaks it, in creating a new expression. So,
And growth and selection?
Selection, yeah.
Selection for me is the fact that thermodynamically already at the lower level, there is some kind of efficiency difference between the same kind of topology of cycle. So there is some cycles that are equivalent, are in the same class of cycle, but they have completely different efficiency, so they need more food to do the same thing. And there is selection because there is a thermodynamic selection, because the one that are more efficient will be the one that runs, and the other will be that in the same time scale. I mean, it's not external selection, it's the thermodynamic selection. And that's what I think is interesting, that I'm not putting by hand anything, it's just a random thing and irreversible process.
And just the last question is, for thermodynamics, you need some temperature. Where do you put it? I mean, is in the reaction rates? Is it Arrhenius?
Yes.
How do you put it?
Rate, automatically you can show that a Gillespie dynamics with a concentration proportional to concentration is equivalent to having a thermal bath at equilibrium. So if you don't put the irreversible part, is equivalent to a thermal bath. If you put the irreversible part, that I don't know where you are. But in my abstraction is like you have a thermal bath that you want to remain coherent, and then you have some irreversible processes on top. I don't know.
For me, you have like two contradictory words here, right? You have equilibrium and life.
Yeah, no, equilibrium is the one that is not interesting here. So the thermal bath is equilibrium. So the cleavage ligation is the equilibrium, and this is just the support. So my idea is that there is this temperature that is creating this thermal bath. It's just ligation cleavage random, and from here you cannot have life. You have just random sequences. But then from here, there is some things that start to develop irreversible, and what they do is that there are some that are more efficient and they're extracting more free energy from the bath, and they can grow in complexity.
Okay, have any other questions or?
Why exactly, maybe I didn't understand it, but why exactly is this SK system chosen? I assume there's multiple similar Turing complete sets of rules. So why specifically that one?
No, so this is a historical reason. So this SK combinator were the first one to be shown to be Turing complete. There are infinite bases. You can imagine that you can define your own combinators, that the only point of a combinator is that it's just doing this shuffling of arguments. But you need to be clever to create one that is Turing complete and is also minimal, in the sense the minimal amount of. And in general, there is a principle that in the combinator that you use, you need always some that are catabolic, like the K, that are reducing expression, and some that are anabolic, that are increasing expression, because then you want loops, and loops makes possible Turing completeness, etc.
The SKI, these combinators were introduced some time ago. So are there any other implementation of this kind of combinators in a system, or were introduced abstractly without an implementation, like say?
No, so the weird thing of these combinators is that they were invented more than a century ago. But at a certain point when let's say Turing machine were idealized and all this, they lost because they were a little bit too difficult to use as conceptually to demonstrate things, not to just. But so they have been kind of in a shadow for 1 century, and recently there has been a little bit of revival, but not mainstream. I mean, just a very specialized mathematician and this guy that I found that
Is to propose to implement in a chemical, as a chemical reaction.
This is the first chemical, but there is Walter Fontana. There is a guy in Los Alamos, and he has invented, like in the 90s, a system that conceptually is very similar to this, that instead of be made of combinators, made of lambda calculus. And lambda calculus, you can show that is I mean, it has the same kind of abstraction of combinators. Lambda calculus is another computation, like another abstraction for computation.
Okay. Any other questions? Any comments? Okay, if not, we thank the speaker. Any question for the audience? No. From the, I mean, the Zoom, no one, right? No raised hands. Okay, so we thank the speaker again.